Good morning and welcome to the viewing and listening audience to this, the 7th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. This is the committee's first hearing with stakeholders pursuant to its examination of unemployment during the COVID-19 pandemic and the state's capacity to provide support to persons who became unemployed as a result of the pandemic. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments on the Parliament's social media platforms, including YouTube channel ParlView, or via our Facebook and Twitter feeds. Thank you so much for joining us. We are happy to welcome members of this committee. I am the committee's chairman, Paul Richards. At this point, I'd invite our members to please introduce themselves, starting with Member Ford.
Yes, good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Esmond Ford, member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Beckles, please. Member Beckles. Let's go to Member Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Avinash Singh, member. Good morning to all members of the committee and our guests this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Nakid. Member David Nakid.
Good morning to all. Senator David Nakid, and happy to have all of you all here.
All right, and Member Penelope Beckles is also with
yes.
us. Member Beckles.
Yes, sorry. Okay, so my mic was off. Yeah, hi. Penelope Beckles, member of the committee.
There are 3 other members in this committee also unable to be with us this morning. Member Roger Monroe, Member of Parliament, and also Member Ruhan Sinan and Senator Ruhan Sinan. So they will not be with us as they're conflicting engagements. The stakeholders with us this morning are going to be representatives of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and the Tobago House of Assembly. At this time, I'd like to invite, we'll go to that in a short while. Let me just go through the 4 objectives of this inquiry before we ask our stakeholders to introduce themselves and their teams. The 4 objectives of the inquiry are: 1, to examine the trends in unemployment and job losses in the private and public sector during the COVID-19 pandemic. 2, to assess the unemployment relief strategies and programs of the state during the COVID-19 pandemic. 3, to examine the proposed strategies of the state to stimulate job creation and employment opportunities to counteract the adverse economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And 4, to examine the changes in the operations of the private sector aimed at sustaining business during the COVID-19 pandemic. I might add that although the title of the inquiry is an examination of unemployment during the COVID-19 pandemic and the state's capacity to provide support to persons who became unemployed as a result of the pandemic. We'd like to contextualize it in a way that we know during the pandemic, there was full unemployment, which some people suffered, but there was also underemployment or partial employment, and some persons may have had their terms and conditions changed. So we wanted to provide an holistic examination of the issue before us. In addition to, while many may think of the unemployment issue as solely an issue that deals with income, we also want to in part examine some aspects of the social and psychological impact that job losses or reduction in employment may have created in the pandemic, to look at a wider picture even in the context of our inquiry title. So we thank you for joining us this morning, and we appreciate you being with us. At this time, I'd like to introduce the stakeholders before us, which include officials of the Ministry of Finance, officials of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, officials of the Ministry of Labor, and officials of the Tobago House of Assembly, Division of Community Development and Enterprise Development. And we can start with the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Strategic Management Execution Office in the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Yvonne Sharon, and please introduce yourself and your team, and you can also deliver brief opening comments.
Good morning, Chairman. I'll introduce the team first. So I am Yvonne Sharon, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance and attached to the Strategic Management and Execution Office. I also have Mr. Anthony Joseph, and I would ask him to introduce himself.
Good morning to the Chairman and members of the committee. I am Anthony Joseph, Manager, Economic Management Division.
The Ministry is also supported, yes, by Mr. Maurice from Netco. So if Maurice will go ahead.
Morning to everyone, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Calvin Maurice, CEO Netco. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad I got your name pronounced right eventually, Ms. Nimacharan. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did get it right, Chairman. I have a very brief statement, which I will make now.
Go ahead, please.
So good morning again, Chairman and members of the Social Services and Public Administration Committee, my colleagues from the Ministry of Finance, attendees from other ministries, and all others present in the meeting this morning. The Ministry of Finance is cognizant of the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the employment situation in our country. And we would have instituted a suite of measures targeted to promote economic relief for individuals and businesses. The Ministry of Finance, we have made a concerted effort to provide the appropriate responses to the issues outlined in your correspondence to us, and we hope the information submitted will assist the committee in its deliberation. Also, the ministry representatives present here this morning is willing to assist the committee with its further deliberation, and hope that our contribution will assist in a meaningful way of achieving the goals of the government and the committee in addressing this very important issue under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nima Sharan of the Ministry of Finance. We move next to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and we welcome Permanent Secretary, Ms. Jacqueline Johnson. Ms. Johnson, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning, Chair, members of the JSC, and my colleagues from the other ministries. I have with me today Mr. Brennan Gowrie, our Director of Monitoring and Evaluation, our Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Michael Reed, and our Director of our Social Investigation Division, Mr. Sion Raymond. Chair, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services continues to support the efforts necessary to assist persons impacted by the COVID pandemic through the existing grant and social services system. We welcome the examination to be undertaken today, as this can provide insights into the ministry's continuing efforts and its strategies to build the social sector system and the lives of the vulnerable families and individuals that we serve. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. P.S. Johnson. We move now to the officials of the Ministry of Labor and the acting PS, Ms. Natalie Willis. Ms. Willis.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I am Natalie Willis, acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labor. With me this morning is, to my right, the Director on the Job Training Division. To my immediate left is Mr. Bruce Spencer, head of our Labor Market Information Unit. And to the far left is Ms. Sangeeta Bundu, our Senior Legal Officer. The Ministry of Labor recognizes the critical role in ensuring that poverty is reduced and that we have macroeconomic stability within the country. The ministry recognizes that it facilitates this through its vision of facilitating decent work and equal opportunities for all and maintaining a stable industrial legal climate. With regard to this inquiry, the ministry notes that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on the lives and livelihoods of persons and has impacted significantly the employment of persons. The ministry looks forward to the discussions that will be ensuing this morning and the recommendations and strategies that will come out of it. I thank you.
Thank you so much, P.S. Willis. And we move now to the officials of the Tobago House of Assembly, Division of Community Development and Enterprise Development, Mr. Mayu, the Director of Labor. Go ahead, please.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Elon Mayo. I am the Manpower and Labor Relations Director for the Department of Labor under the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor under the Tobago House of Assembly. Welcome to the chair, welcome to Trinidad and Tobago. The Tobago House of Assembly, specifically the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor, we fully understand the precedents of this committee, and we also understand the aspects of what has to be discussed. We hope that our submission provides some insights into our efforts to help with the unemployment and underemployment of Tobagonians in Tobago, and we look forward to any recommendations to help us go forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayo. At this time, I'd just like to advise stakeholders to please direct your questions, concerns, and comments through me, the chair. We'd remind members to kindly activate your microphone on your devices when you are acknowledged by the chair, and turn off your microphone when you have concluded your contributions. It's also important to remember that this is being streamed and broadcast, so your camera picks up everything behind and around you if people are moving around behind you. So please be mindful of that that reality. Okay, so we can start now. I'd like to direct the first question to the Ministry of Finance and Deputy PS Yvonne Ni Marcharan. Deputy PS, give us a sense. Of course, this was a transition that the state had to execute quite quickly, and there were some challenges at the start of the pandemic in terms of applications for support and for persons who became unemployed, and also businesses that were facing challenges. Give us a sense of the main challenges experienced by the ministry and how you have mitigated or remediated those over the last 18 or so months.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. So I'll start with perhaps the salary relief grant, which was the one that the Ministry of Finance was directly involved in. The other measures, we would have had different agencies and different institutions executing those. So one of the main challenges with that particular program was the manual system. We had used a manual form, the application form that had to be completed by the applicants, submitted, and then transferred into a database. So because of the manual nature, the process was a little bit longer, so the grant did not reach in the time that we would have liked. In the new phase, the phase 2 as we call it, for the same program, we have instituted a totally electronic system where the forms are done online. We no longer have the manual system, so there was not the added process of inputting it into an electronic system. That has certainly reduced the time frame. Also, we had a challenge where persons might have applied for both the salary relief grant and the income support at the ministry, because so what we have done to mitigate that is we match our applicants from both sides. So we are now matching so that we have only one client receiving a grant, either the salary relief through the NIB system or the income support. I would ask Mr. Maurice to probably share if there was any on the entrepreneurial fund.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We immediately started with an online system to have application received into Netco. And there were two issues with that. One, based on the number of applications received in the initial instant, created some technical issues in regards to the electronic arrangement. We eventually, of course, dealt with that. The other issue would have been the speed in which Netco initially would have responded, given the various technical issues, because we immediately went online and also virtual in regards to examining the application through virtual visits and the various aspects of keeping a measure of quality assurance within terms of the delivery of the service. And that initial instant took some time for us to settle in, but we eventually did. The third issue would have been, just as the PS indicated, would have been streamlining those applications that would have gotten grants in other areas. So therefore, there would have been a need to cross-reference these applicants to ensure that we are providing the grants to the ones that are in compliance with the arrangement. Thank you.
Just before I go to Member Singh for DPS, could you give us a sense of the prerequisites to persons for the income support grant, and to Mr. Maurice for the businesses that would have received or applied for the business support grants? What were the prerequisites, and what were the main anomalies in terms of they being able to supply the data that the ministry and Netco required to, one, approve, and two, facilitate the smooth transfer of those support grants? Because in the public domain, there was quite a bit of conversation about employers not paying X and persons not having the ID material and being registered X and Y, which would have impacted negatively the ability to, one, apply for, and two, receive these grants. So if I can start with DPS on that, the main reasons for applicants being unsuccessful in the support grants, and also the securing a loan. And from Netco's perspective, the prerequisites and what are the follow-ups in terms of these businesses, if Netco has followed up to see which businesses were able to stay afloat even though the grant was limited, and what kind of data you were able to glean from that process. So we can start with DPS on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be able to speak on the salary relief grant. You mentioned the income support, and social development might be better able because they process that particular grant.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yes,
right.
That's fine.
So with respect to...
Go ahead.
With respect to the...
Go ahead, Ms. Nimashwan.
Okay, sorry. Yes. With respect to the salary relief grant, the eligibility criteria were the date that the person became unemployed, that they must not be in receipt of any other support, any other grant, because we wanted to facilitate those who are totally without support. And they must be, well, of course, a national, and the ID card was one of the requirements to support that. The issues coming out of those are that persons would have put the incorrect or the date outside of the eligible dates. They would have provided part of their ID information. They might provide only the front, not the back with the data. So those are some of the challenges we had and the criteria that was required.
Thank you, Mr. Maurice.
Thank you very much. The criteria in regards to accessing entrepreneurial relief grant would have been certificate of registration of the business, identification of the owner of the business, proof of address, financial records, invoices spent in the period we were reimbursing or supporting the business in terms of loss, receipts if available. Some of the problems we had with that, or one of the main problems we had with that, would have been applicants providing the information on a timely basis, which kept back or slowed the process of processing the application. So that was one of the major issues, more or less, I would say, in regards to that particular area. As relates to applications that were unsuccessful, there were 270 applications that were unsuccessful. And that was basically because of some of them being non-nationals. Some of them had already received a grant in one of the other ministries, and simply others who did not provide information to complete the application process. What we have done since then, however, is to follow up in the first instance, because we will be doing a tracer study post disbursement that will pick up more information. But in the first instance, we want to find out from the applicants, what other support do you need so that we can carry you through this period? And in our survey, we had, at that time, when we did the survey, there would have been 1,488 applications. Of that, 676 responded. And the greater group, so we had a balanced group of male and females in terms of the respondents. And the age group would have been 53% would have been between the age group of 36 to 50 years of age. The smaller group would have been between 26 to 35 years of age, making up 28% in terms of the response. Most of them, however, asked for further training, mentorship, which we also did through our webinars. We covered over nearly 2,500 training and mentorship programs thus far with regards to applicants. They came from most of them came from the retail sector, and 11.5% came from the clothing sector. So essentially, we are keeping in touch with these applicants. Most of them had employed less than 5 employees, those persons who responded in our initial survey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Singh, stand by with your question, please, just before we go to your Member Singh. DPS, your submission stated that 490 payments were rejected by the automated clearinghouse ACH system and are now being processed for payment via debit cards. Two-part question before we go to Member Singh. What is the estimated time frame for the completion of these outstanding payments? And is there an arrangement in place to provide the applicants with a status update on the processing of these applications, these 490 payments that were initially rejected by ACH?
Thank you, Chair. The estimated time for the debit cards to be prepared could be to the end of this year. The debit card takes the debit card takes a little while because it's a facility we have to engage the FCB, the bank for. And the status, can you repeat the second question? The
second part is there an arrangement? Did you contact the applicants who are on standby, the 490, to let them know, well, it's going to be in this time frame or that time frame?
Yes, we have a callback system where we call the applicants to provide a status on their application.
Thank you. Member Ford has a question on this, and then we go to Member Singh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the acting PS at Ministry of Finance, as coincidentally only yesterday, a young lady who resides in my community inquired of me to find out about her salary relief grant. She applied initially, right, which I presume she's probably part of this 490 that is here. She said she submitted everything, her bank documents and everything as the case may be. So an individual like that fits into this category that they should be contacted and should receive their salary relief grant sometime between now and the end of the year, as you are stating. Let's reiterate that point for me, please. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. They should be contacted. However, I cannot say that she may be within the 490 applicants, because we'll have to check and see what might be her issue for not having received her grant already.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because is it that if someone was ineligible for whatever reason, they were actually contacted by the ministry and said, well, we realize you've applied, but you are ineligible and will not be getting the grant? Because that has been a point of contention. People don't know whether they have been rejected for the grant for whatever reason, and they are still in limbo waiting, well, maybe I'll get the grant, maybe I won't get the grant, maybe it'll come in 6 months. Is there a process in place to identify to people, well, you have been deemed ineligible and you will not be getting the grant for X or Y reason?
Yes, we have put in place a call system. Because of the number of applicants, not all persons would have been contacted already, but yes, we have special numbers assigned, and we do have a call system to the applicants to give them an update on what's the status of their application.
Just before I go to member Singh again, would you have data on how many persons were rejected from the overall applications, and a percentage of rejections compared to those who would have been approved and or received?
I have the data present. So,
go ahead, please.
Right. The data with respect to the second phase, we have 23,234 persons who applied for the grant. Of that, 7,045 at this time are deemed unsuccessful.
Okay, so roughly 1/3.
Yes.
Okay, member Singh, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again, everyone. To the team from the Ministry of Finance, I'm curious to know, because I saw in your responses, you did indicate for transparency and accountability purposes, we have a data sharing arrangement between Ministry of Finance and Social Development. I'm curious to know if, however, we have picked up any persons in the system that, in local terms, double dipped from these grants. In other words, persons accessing both of the grants, and they may have fallen through the crack in terms of our picking up on that data. And if we have, what took place or what transpired subsequent to that? And with this response, I'll ask a couple.
Go ahead, DPS. I think the question is directed at you.
Yes. Good morning. Thanks for the question, Mr. Singh. I did not hear the last part of it. It went, we missed part of what he asked, but I could answer the part about the comparison and what took place. So we did have a couple that we would assign. I do not have the number with me, but we did have applicants for both the income support and the salary relief grant. The criteria is if you have an NIS number, it will be paid through the salary relief grant. And if not, it will be paid through the income support system at the Ministry of Social Development. So it depended on which grant the eligibility would fall under. It will be processed there only once. So that this time we avoided the possibility of having two payments from the two programs paid to any one individual. The number of those I will have to provide, of how many. And I think Mr. Singh would have asked another question that I did not hear the rest of his question. Our audio was bad.
You answered that part of it. Just to follow up, in terms of the Ministry of Finance, I wanted to know, did the Ministry of Finance implement a complaints process for persons who may have queries, complaints? And this is just to tie back, what the chairman was asking prior in terms of persons getting information from the Ministry of Finance in relation to the disbursements of these grants. So if you could just identify what complaint process is in place and how persons can access that complaints process.
Like I said before, again, we had a call system, so there is a number that is available to call in to find out about your status or complain, as you say. I don't have the phone number with me. I'll try to access it during the meeting and I will share that. But that is the process. It's only a system where they can call in. And we do have that system is being used very actively. We are, as you could well imagine, inundated with a lot of calls. And we try to address them. So there is a system at our command center which deals with the call-in.
Member Singh, you're through or you have further questions? Member Singh, you're through?
I want to turn to... No, Mr. Chairman, I have one question for Netco.
Go ahead, please.
Right, so in terms of the entrepreneurial grant facility, I wanted to have an idea in terms of what was the cost of establishing the e-platform that you mentioned for the processing of the applications. And in terms of this contractual arrangement, are we still with this company or are they still providing technical support for the online platform, or is it managed internally now to Netco?
Basically, we still provided with that external support. If you wish, I can also mention the name. If not, I will hold on that in terms of the provider. But it's costing us an average of $2,500 per quarter. It can be, as I said, it's an average. So we have that contractual arrangement based on a quarter.
Is that TT or US dollars?
TT.
$2,500 a quarter?
Yes, TT. Okay. So I can also provide, confirm that through direct correspondence with the committee after as well.
And Chairman, last question on this.
Please go ahead.
Should the ministry decide to engage in further public-private partnership arrangements, I wanted to get an idea of what industries or business sectors you all can forecast or determine that might be targeted in this public partnership arrangements and going forward. So, and anyone from Ministry of Finance can answer this question.
PS, are you going to take the question?
Mr. Joseph will take the question. Committee, go ahead.
Hi, member. Yes, one of the industries we're looking at will be the maritime area. Okay, and we could consider the area of ship repairs and other services in the maritime sector for PPPs. Also, we would have identified, as you may recall, the port of Port of Spain. We are looking for a private sector participation in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member Naked, go ahead, please.
Since we are talking with, we have the Ministry of Finance here, I just wanted to ask a question. As we spoke, we mentioned the grants. I recall the Minister of Finance said in one of his contributions that of 24,000 applications, because I'm hearing extremely low numbers here, but he said that of 24,000 applications, 4,000 applications for grants had been dealt with. Has that situation been ameliorated, or what is the updated status of that? If his remarks we would consider to be true.
DPS, would that be the 23,234 that you identified as applications earlier on?
Yeah, so I had now, well, the 24,000 though, as you would have seen in the second bullet point, was the application that was received, but of that 24,000, 1,062 were identified as duplicates. Our response on question 4. And then how many persons received the grants? For the period May to June, we had paid 12,695. So every day or each week we are processing, we do them in batches. So the numbers that would have shared, except for the amount that's actually received or applied, the amount that is received will change continuously as we process them.
But I appreciate very much that it has been better, the situation has been bettered, but you're talking about, let's say 24,000 minus 1,000 you said were duplicates. Let's give another 1,000 maybe for people who double dip, and we're looking at about 22,000. You said 12,000 has been paid, correct?
Correct, up to November 5th, and during the last...
And these applications, as far as I remember, from the Minister of Finance was since April. How are the rest of the 10,000? How are they dealing with their lives? Have you any idea? How are they putting food on the table for their children? How is that being done?
Member Naked, that is not a question for this forum, and I understand your concern, but that is not a question that the DPS can answer.
So what forum is that a question for, Chairman?
It is not a question for this forum that the DPS cannot answer, Member Naked, how people are putting food on their tables. Is there a question related to the information supplied that you
yes,
like
how soon then, Chairman, can that be expedited to facilitate the 10,000 people who have been waiting almost 6-7 months to put food on the table for their children, to be precise? Can that be answered?
DPS, is there a time frame within which this process can be completed?
Yes, Chairman, we are working towards the end of this month. I would also like to state that of the figures that we would have called, there were 7,000 who were unsuccessful. So that will reduce the 10. That's our, your C question, how many would have applied were unsuccessful? So just to bring the figures into context. And we are hoping to complete the process by November. However, I would have told you that the card, which takes a little bit longer, we hope to do that within the month of December. So this program with the 24,000 should be completed by the end of November. We are working towards or December for the cards.
Any follow-up question, Member Naked?
Well, wishing you all the best, and hopefully by Christmas they will have some of these grants. So I thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you, DPS. Let's move now to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Can I call on Member Beckles to lead off the questioning on the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, please?
Okay, so that I just wanted to get to similar to what was provided by the Ministry of Finance. Can you give an indication as to how many persons would not have been successful in the application? Was that?
Good morning, Ms. Beckles. Chairman, may I proceed?
Yes, please.
Yes, if the question, I understand it to be how many were unsuccessful in the application. And with respect to the salary relief grant, it is 7,045 in this phase 2 of the program.
Okay, can I make an inquiry as it relates to what sort of analysis is done on those 7,000? What could you give us a sense as to why those persons were unsuccessful?
Yes, generally, they would not have they would not have met one of the criteria that was set out. Most of the time it would have been because the unemployment will not have been in the stipulated date. So they may have been, this program started in May and their last employment date should have been the 28th of April, and they may have not had that particular date. It might have been before, but that was the process for this phase.
Okay, so just for persons who are listening, again, could you just elaborate a bit on the criteria?
Well, it would have been for a particular period when you would have been unemployed, and that would have been from April 28th to May 31st. And you had to be a national of the country and not in receipt of any other grant.
Okay, and can I just ask one more question? Bearing in mind the issue of the technology and the challenges that are being faced because of COVID, is there another method outside the direct application to the Ministry of Finance?
For this program, we only use the direct, for the second phase, we use the direct online only. The first phase, we had used the form itself to be completed, but that had various issues, and to mitigate those, we use the online.
Okay, so just a question that I would normally get as a member of Parliament, which is the difficulty if there are questions to be asked, and you know, in terms of general being able to contact the ministry, is there any special unit for like asking questions or any queries?
Yeah, yes, there is. We have what we call the command center, the salary relief grant command center, and I
Could you
do
share
have
that
the
information, please?
Yes, the phone numbers are 689-1493.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, the number is 800-6774.
And that is those are normal hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4?
Yes, those are normal hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4.
Okay.
So there were only two numbers, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
8 to 4 for people to receive information and queries and stuff like that. Was that adequate?
Well, like I said before, it really was a lot of calls we got. So whether it's adequate is something we may have to look at, but that is what was implemented. Apart from that, of course, persons would have contacted the ministry directly. This is a center that we had set up for this program, but we do get called otherwise.
But given the fact that there was no walk-in ability with this situation, was there an online portal additional to that?
No, the portal was, yes, there is an email system that is being used. We would have contacted persons through their email as well, because the form in itself, it was done through the email and the online. So for queries,
Member Beckles, you can continue, please.
Okay, I will come back for the time being. I think I'll hold there for now.
All right, on to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Could you give us a sense, like we did with the Ministry of Finance, of the overall number of applications, those that were successful, the reasons, the eligibility criteria, and the reasons for those who would have been rejected, and your communication mechanism for those who would have been applying and receiving grants, please?
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Social Development received a total of 69,484 applications, and that 62,739 were for phase 1 of COVID, and 6,743 were for phase 2 of COVID. If I could focus on phase 1 initially, our applications came in to the system via a company called Island originally, as well as via hard copies of applications dropped off at the ministries and their various regional offices. These applications, all 62,000, are hard documents which we have stored in boxes, and we have been attempting to put those online. The issue challenge for us was in the processing stage, and we did some things within that period to ensure that we expedite our payments by engaging some full-time validators to support the in-house staff. We did engage NIB and First Citizens Bank to support the printing of checks, and TT Post to support the distribution of the checks. And we created a call center. In phase 2, to treat with the challenge, what we did was create the electronic system, and we established some business rules to treat with the application process to help us deal with the validation process. And then we again hired specialized validators to treat with the processing of the applications. We also did the data sharing part with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that we had no further double dipping in the system. In terms of the number of approved applications, we currently have 59,716 applications which were approved at phase 1, 4,940 rejected. In phase 2, we have 1,271 applications approved, and we have 5,472 rejected.
What were the main reasons for the rejections, and even before that, just so people looking on and get a sense of the eligibility criteria, and what were the objectives in terms of eligibility criteria for these particular social support grants?
Certainly, Chair. In phase 1, the eligibility criteria were that you had to have an identification card or certificate of registration for non-nationals. You had to have your certificate of registration for your business if you were self-employed. You had to ensure that you had a proper declaration signed, and these are our business rules. You had to ensure that you had your employer's information was included, and the letter from the employer on the letterhead, the letter of the employer's ID in case of small businesses, your employer's stamp, your employee's pay slip. The effective date of your retrenchment, termination, reduced income must have been March 1st, 2020. For employed members of the family, proof of earnings via job letter or pay slip totaling earnings of the family must have been less than 10,000 after the statutory deductions. And the deadline for the application was July 31st, 2020. In phase one, we paid 3 grants. We paid the income support grant. We paid the food support grant. We did the rental grant. So those were the 3 grants we were offering, and those were the general criteria governing the rules for validating the applications. In addition, in phase one, for those persons who were self-employed, besides the requirement above, they had to get a recommender who we identified must have some particular characteristics, and the recommender had to know the applicant for at least 3 years, and the recommender was required to sign a document which was attached to the application. Those were the requirements for those persons who were self-employed.
Before I go to Member Beckles again and Member Ford, and this is in terms of data gathering and analysis, to your good self, Ms. Johnson, and then to the DPS, Ministry of Finance. What would you have learned in terms of analysis to be given the data that you would have collected for processing these eligible or ineligible people to be the vulnerable sectors in society? What does that demographic look like in terms of age, geographic location, sector employed in that would have been significantly impacted more than another sector, so that we get a sense of where the vulnerabilities are in the national space? Because I think this is a great opportunity that we could do that kind of analysis, given the 69, almost 70,000 persons you identified earlier on, and certainly it may be representative of a wider need in society. So I'll start with Ms. Johnson on that, and then go to DPS from the Ministry of Finance perspective, because this is also, I think, an opportunity for data collection and analysis.
And Chair, I fully agree with you. In our submission at Appendix 2, we looked at the sex disaggregated data and the age disaggregated data. But in addition to that, we also looked at the geographical data that the information presented for us. So in terms of both phases, we had a predominance of men, for example, applying for the various grants. In terms of the age disaggregation, our predominant age group was the 31 to 45 age group in both phases. And in terms of the demographics, our major areas for applicants came, and I'm just going to call the first 7. It would include the Kufa, Tabaki, Talparo region, Sawa, Laventil, Tunapuna, Piako. Those were the key areas for us in terms of the areas where most of our applicants came from.
Would you provide the actual numbers to the committee in writing?
Yes, we can provide that data.
Thank you. DPS, could you give a similar breakdown for us, please, if possible?
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, the ministry did not do that kind of analysis as the Social Development Ministry did, but we can certainly undertake to do so and provide some form of data for the committee.
Thank you. We appreciate that when you submitted in writing. Ms. Johnson, would you also have a sense of the sectors that were most impacted in terms of employment based on the information that you would have gleaned in your application processes?
We
Then we could go to Member Ford and Member Beckles.
Yes, Chair. We in phase 2, we were able to collect that data, and the sectors that we found most predominant in terms of unemployment were the construction industry, the retail establishment industry, and the persons who sell or offer for sale or drink on the streets and restaurants. Those were the 5.
So persons who were self-employed primarily.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Member Ford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam PS, in your submission also provided a breakdown of the application details of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services COVID relief grants. On page 5, question 3C, please indicate the various reasons for applications being rejected, right? Because we would have, received complaints of individuals that, were not successful in receiving some of the grants. So could you identify some of the various reasons that could have been possible for some persons not qualifying for these grants? Thank you.
Certainly, Chair. The reasons are varied. We did an analysis of all our applicants who were rejected, and the reasons fall within about 25 categories. I will just mention the main one. For
yes, appreciate.
Phase, a lot of our applicants had NIS numbers, and once you had an NIS number, your application was sent to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Social Development were not allowed to make payments of the income support grant to persons who had an NIS number on their application. So that was one of the main reasons. One of the second reason was the effective date of the retrenchment or loss of income was not March of 2020, and that resulted in the rejection there. We have clients who were double dipping and we removed them. They might have been paid already by the Ministry of Finance. The employer information was missing on some of the applications. Some of the sectors were ineligible, and this would be people who were public officers and maybe already receiving their salary, applying here for the grant. We also have application forms which did not have the required documentation, such as the identification card, or the person was clearly a foreigner without any form of registration in the country. So those were some of the main reasons why applicants were rejected.
Were the public officers reported? Sorry to put you on the spot, because it seems obscene. Don't answer that. Member Beckles, then member Naked and member Singh. Don't answer that. Yes, please. Yeah, put yourself
okay, so I just want to continue on from MP Ford. I want to ask a question, based on the criteria, and thank, of course, PS Johnson for your detail. Now, is there an educational component in this particular exercise? I ask that because it's a lot of information, the criteria and what you are presenting to us. I don't know whether in your data analysis, for example, you have found that people have to provide information, whether the application is short and whether they have to submit over and over. I just wanted to get a sense of this as to whether you can provide any information on that, if that has been the experience, or you find that most of the applications, people are successful first or second time. in terms of presenting the information requested. The other issue has to do with whether or not people are officially informed when they don't meet the criteria. In other words, when the number of persons that were rejected, are they officially informed, and are they advised as to what is the reason why they were not successful? And following up on the chairman's question, is there any, I know you gave information, I think, on the first phase in terms of the number of men that have applied. Do you have any data in terms of the number of women that have applied? Thank you.
Chair, can I start with the percentage of women?
Please do. Please do.
In terms of our overall, in phase 1, we had 61% male, 35% female, and 4% who did not indicate. And in phase 2, we had 45% female and 51% male.
Could that be, just before you answer Member Becker's question, is that a reflection of a person who may be heading a household applying on behalf of the household? Because it seems counter to the global statistics and women being disproportionately affected in terms of employment during the pandemic.
Chairman, it may be because of the validation process, and that would require further detailed analysis plan for this data by the ministry. But it may be at variance with the gender impact assessment that was done at the Office of the Prime Minister. We have to look closer at the data generated from that study with what has been generated here from our application process.
Thank you.
So I can't say with
Can I ask one more question on that? In terms of the data that you presented about the persons rejected, are you able to as well give the analysis of that, male and female?
Yes, we can, but I don't have it, Chair, with me at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
You can supply in writing, please, PS.
Thank you.
Member Naked and then Member Singh, please.
Chair, I think I have 2 questions to answer from.
Yeah, you can complete answering. Sorry about that. My apologies. And then Member Naked and Member Singh. My apologies.
In terms of educating the public on the application process, the ministry have sent out approximately 15 media releases and information pieces on the newspaper and our website indicating the process for applications. I don't know whether that would have been adequate, but it seems in my view to be a lot. So the information has been out there in terms of who can apply and how to apply. The information on whether you were rejected was shared via the call center, which we established in May 2020. Persons call this center to determine the status of their application. And we also have a system in place where we call members whose checks of the applicants whose checks are ready for collection. Chair, we still engaged in that exercise because a lot of people did not collect their checks. Checks have to be revalidated and persons have to be called again to come and collect their checks. And there's still quite a bit of outstanding checks which remain uncollected. We also use WhatsApp as a method for contacting applicants.
Thank you,
No, but,
Member.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you very much. Yes.
Go ahead, Member Ford.
Could the PS provide that information to us in writing, please? The number of checks and the quantum and the value and stuff, because you know we have been hearing the negative side sometimes coming from the public on, you know, no grants were paid, people have received their grants, but now we are hearing also that there are individuals, you know, that where payments are due. So it would be interesting that if we can be supplied with that information, or probably even now as we're in the viewing public, if she can just give us like some total figures, some total numbers, just, you know, so that the listening public can have an appreciation for it. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if we have the time or if you'll give it in right. to provide it in writing.
But if PS has it now, we'd appreciate it. But if not, in writing would be appropriate. I have no problem with that. Thank you.
Yeah, we just had NIB print 265 checks. We got those checks on Friday, and we are going to advertise, and it's gone to our call center already to get those 265 persons to come in to collect their checks. That was part of a bulk of checks returned by TT Post, which were not delivered because the addresses on the applications were wrong and the telephone numbers on the applications were also wrong. So that's a batch of 576 checks. We did put out an advertisement to have those people come in and correct their information. We got 265 persons coming in. We asked the NIB to reprint those checks, and we have those checks being handed out from today by the public. We also have the banks returning their monies we paid via the ACH system, and because the applicant's account might have been closed, we are trying to sort out those as best as possible so that we could pay via a check to the application. So all those things are currently being addressed.
Thank you. Member Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I must say, the responses and the information supplied by Ministry of Social Development, has really been forthcoming and very, very succinct.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was just telling the Secretariat that I have to commend
I must say so, because I also want to take the opportunity to really congratulate and thank this ministry for being the frontline ministry in terms, especially at a time when our population is significantly seeking the services and the goods and services of this ministry. And in the execution of their work, I want to place on record my appreciation and congratulations, because I don't know if maybe I've missed it, because in the past, you would always hear that term of corruption in these types of services, especially when a state entity is giving out grants and funds and all of these support, income support and so on. I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't really hear anything in the public domain about persons, defrauding, staff defrauding and corruption and things like that. I want to commend this ministry and the permanent secretary, and by extension, the aligned minister, for a job well done. I also want to stick a little pin in relation to, I want to get a sense of feedback from this ministry in terms of the support from the Ministry of Agriculture via the market boxes. I know it was a new initiative being rolled out, and I know it's going to continue. And it's very, very good and promising news to the farming population, which of course the whole population know, I may have a little bias towards, because I'm in that ministry. But what is the sense of that sense of the take from the receivers of these grants, especially the food boxes and the market boxes? Did they appreciate it? How did they, receive it? Is it something that you can see being expanded? Because it goes both ways, Chairman. It assists the farmers as well as it assists, the population getting a healthy food choice.
You made a good plug for your ministry there. P.S.
Thanks, Chairman.
Chairman, we are undertaking a study currently on our food support system. I don't want to preempt the results, but Mr. Gori here, our M&E director, could give us just a brief preliminary review on the feedback from that. The final report is and the assessment of the data we have gathered over the past 2 months is not complete, but he might be able to share a few insights briefly on that exercise.
We'd appreciate that. Please do.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members, colleagues. Just a review that we did on the food support. We were very happy of what we did so far to them. many persons who are still unemployed appreciated the fact that that they were accepted on the food grant, and they are trying their best to become resilient by offering training courses that we offer them, and also they are trying to have their own garden in their home so that they can suffice their food bill in addition to what we give them.
All right, thank you. I want to move to the Ministry of Labor, which is extremely important in this inquiry, and start by asking the ministry to give us a sense of the overall impact of the pandemic on employment, underemployment, partial employment in Trinidad and Tobago. And I know the information may not be readily available, but based on the data that you have so far, what can you tell us about the impact of the pandemic in the last 18 months on employment in the country?
Okay, so Chair, we will have gathered some information relative to what you are asking. In terms of, we would gather that information usually from the CSO. And what I was going to ask the kind of my labor information, my labor market information to provide that response to.
Okay, right, so we want getting data up to the second quarter.
Can I, for some reason, is it Mr. Reed or Mr. Riemann? You're coming over extremely muffled, so I don't know if it's protocol.
But I can't hear him at all.
Yeah, we're not hearing at all.
Yeah, no?
Yes, we're hearing you better now. Thank you.
Yes.
What happens is that we will collect data from the CSO after the second quarter of 2020. Now, the third quarter of 2020 was coming.
Sorry to interrupt you again, but for some reason he's not coming over clearly, and we had the acting PS with her mask and she was clear. So I don't know if it's a mic positioning issue, but we're not hearing the gentleman at all clearly.
Neither am I, sir.
Okay, so I'll forward the mic possibility. Are you ready?
A little better, not great, but go ahead, please.
Okay, all right. So for the speaker a little louder. So the situation is that we would have collected data of the second quarter of 2020, which was March to June, and that would have been only available data at this year. So, yeah.
Okay, is there someone else who can give that information? Sorry about that, because we're not hearing you clearly at all. Or it may have to try taking off the video. It may be a bandwidth issue. So try taking off the video and just using mic. Let's see if that works.
Yes.
So I'm not understanding. You're not hearing me properly, sir?
No.
What we'll do is we'll allow tech to try to sort out that, and we move on to THA briefly, because we're not hearing clearly there at all. Okay, so we're going to ask tech to see what we can do there. Apologies for that, but let's move on to the THA for the time being, and we'll come back to the Ministry of Labor. Okay, so let's move to Mr. Elon Mayo. Good morning again, Mr. Mayo. Thank you for your patience. Give us a sense from the THA and Tobago's perspective of what the lay of the land has been in terms of the impact of the pandemic on employment, underemployment, partial employment in Tobago. We know Tobago is largely driven by tourism and also the employment within the THA. But what else can you tell us about what you've been able to gather in terms of data on the impact of the pandemic?
Good morning, everyone, again. Within the aspect of the Tobago House of Assembly, what we've been seeing here from our division specifically is that you have a level of underemployment. The unfortunate aspect is that we have not been able to capture officially the data on underemployment in Tobago. From what the PS or DPS social environment said, it is true in that the aspects within Tobago that would have been affected would have been the domestic industry, for the hotels, the guest houses, the retailers and the construction industry for underemployment as well as unemployment. That's the lay of the land within that aspect within 2020 and partially 2021. We have been able to, well, my division has been able to provide some retooling and retraining aspects under the community development department in assisting in retooling them with different skills from the vocational skills classes that we provide. With that, our department here, the Labor Department, has been working tirelessly with our partner, the Ministry of Labor, in aspects of assisting persons in getting other jobs, which by they may have been retrenched, laid off in that manner. So that's the lay of the land when it comes to the labor aspect. And
but given that Tobago is primarily, the economy is primarily driven by THA employment and the hotel, guest house, tourism industry, and that has been shut down for the better part of over a year. What are the other jobs that you're referencing? And is it that Tobagonians had received any of the grants from the Ministry of Social Development Finance, or the THA also provided some financial support and intervention to those who would have been affected?
The THA would have provided some support to the business aspect of businesses within Tobago. The other aspect of the personalized checks, those applications would have been transferred across to social development. But our business development unit here would have taken an active part in assisting businesses in Tobago in staying afloat to a point, to a certain level.
Chair, can I ask whether he has the data as it relates to that?
I was going to ask that. What were the eligibility criteria for the THA to provide those business support initiatives, and how many were actually disbursed? What's the application level like, and how many were actually disbursed, how many were rejected, etc.?
I can't submit in writing the eligibility. I don't have that information on me currently. However, I was able to get information on specifics pertaining to particular grants. For example, I got information yesterday, approximately 351 grants were dispersed, 293 were COVID grants to businesses, and 28 were tourism grants, 6 were COVID loans, and 30 were non-COVID grants.
All right, thank you. Member Ford or Member Singh or Member Naki, you have any questions to Mr. Mayo?
Chair, I just wanted to follow up.
Go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead, please.
Yeah. Okay, and that was based on the information that he indicated that was sent to the Ministry of Social Development, I think. Could you give us what sort of numbers were sent in relation to the Ministry of Social Development?
I can get that information for you and
submit. Okay, thank you. All right.
All right, Member Ford, Member Naked, Member Singh, any questions to Mr. Mayo? Mr. Mayo, while
Chairman.
Go ahead, Member Naked.
Mr. Mayo, since you indicated that about the underemployment, and we know that Tobago, the economy, as Chairman said, is from the THA and from tourism. I just want some clarity. You said that tourism grants were granted, 28, I think you said?
Yes,
who would qualify for a tourism grant, for example, just to be clear for those listening?
And what is a tourism grant?
Exactly.
I can get all that information for you and submit it to the committee. However, I would not be able to say officially, but that information is documented and I can have it constantly.
But you don't know what a tourism grant is?
No, I know what it is. But to say that the document in front of me gives you an actual definition, I would not be able to.
Well, just give us a sense of what you think a tourism grant is.
Well, from what our business development unit posted, it was the grant to help businesses within the tourism industry. For example, for the ones who do tours, the ones who do the water sports, those things that the industries that directly impact the tourism industry.
And those went through the THA?
Yes.
Okay.
Not to belabor, yes, Mr. Mayo, not to belabor the point, and I know it has nothing to do with you, so it's not an attack, but given the industry that Tobago serves, wouldn't 28 tourism grants be very small amount?
To be honest with you, sir, I cannot give an opinion on that because I would not know the criteria, one, as well as I would not know how many businesses would have been accepted or rejected.
Okay, Mr. Mayo.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mayo. Yes, Member Ford.
Right. Now, these business development grants that we are talking about, this tourism grant. Now, this is separate and apart. You're hearing me, Chairman? You all hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes, we're hearing you loud and clear.
This is separate and apart of the subvention that would have been given by central government with regards to the tourism industry in Trinidad and Tobago. Clarify, please, because remember, there was a separate figure that was supplied by the Honorable Prime Minister and also the Ministry of Finance with regards to boosting the tourism industry during this COVID period. Yes, this is separate and apart from what Mr. Mayo is talking about.
No. That tourism grant that was given out by THU was part of that. Okay. Because remember you had the personal grant which was conducted by Ministry of Finance and Social Development, and then the Tobago House of Assembly through the Business Development Unit. I'm not sure if Netco was part of that. We're also giving out grants to businesses to help them stay afloat, help pay salaries and things like that. So there were two different grants. One was directed towards the tourism industry, and the other one was directed towards the other retail private sector, small businesses.
Right. So, Mr. Mayo, so as of today, right, we are in November 2021, right? Funds would have been allocated, funds would have been presented to these various entities that are involved in tourism. Is Tobago ready for an influx of tourists as we go forward into the Christmas season, into 2022? What's the status? Give us a little feel of what's the climate like with regards to, because we are hearing that Virgin Atlantic supposed to start coming. We're hearing about the flights that's supposed to be coming in from Amsterdam and those places. Give us a little feel of what's happening in Tobago.
Member Ford, if I give an opinion on that, that would be a personal opinion. It would not be an official opinion of the Tobago House of Assembly, because the question that you asked me, I would not have the accurate information in hand, because that information would be within another permit of another division, the Division of Tourism and Culture.
And that is a well-trained public servant there. Good response.
Mr. Mayo,
I wanted.
Sorry.
Member Naka, go ahead, please.
Mr. Mayo, can you just give us an indication of how the amount of those grants? How much would a tourism grant be, for example?
I cannot give you the amount, but what I can give you is the amount of the 20 grants that were given, if permitted.
The total, please do.
Yes, the total of the 28 grants were 1,088,645,57
And can we presume each of these grants will be equal?
Pardon me?
Can we presume each of those grants will be an equal amount?
Well, we can't presume that, I hope.
So some would get some more based on what?
I don't, as I said before, I would not know the criteria because, as I said, based upon the business and the nature of the business, some businesses may need more than others. So I cannot give an official response on that. But I can give you the, as I said, I just gave you the amount of the 28 tourism grants.
In total, okay, thank you.
The chairman, can we get in writing from
Yeah,
Mr. Mario?
you could supply in writing the eligibility criteria and the breakdown of the 28 grants in terms of 28 numbers. That shouldn't be too difficult. That could fit on an Excel sheet. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. We understand that this was pretty short notice for you, so we appreciate your attempt to answer the question this morning.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Can we go back to the Ministry of Labor? Are we ready for acting PS Willis and her team?
Hello, yes, you are ready to respond. Are you hearing us clearly?
A little better, thank you.
So as indicated, we will have data.
Chairman, we're not hearing you. We're not hearing you properly at all.
We're still not hearing you clearly, Miss Acting PS Miss Willis. I don't know if it's a technical issue on your microphone side there, but it is quite cloudy and almost indecipherable. So I don't know if tech can continue working at that. All right. In the meantime, we can go back to the Ministry of Finance at this point and DPS. Based on what you've heard so far, can you give us a sense of, and we asked the question earlier, but I'll expand it a bit, of if the ministry plans to do some sort of, in collaboration with possibly the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, national impact survey to give us a sense of where the vulnerabilities still lie, because certainly the response of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Social Development, Family Services, and other adjoining ministries would have been in an emergency pandemic situation. The state is moving out of that now, but certainly the impact will be felt way into past the SOE possibly lifting today, and the recovery of the economic sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. So based on that, are there plans by the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Planning, well, you can answer for them, but the Ministry of Finance, to initiate some sort of impact survey nationally? TPS, Ministry of Finance.
Yes, Chairman. At this time, we don't have a plan per se, but I'm sure that it may come out of your recommendation, and we'll be happy to do so. And as you have said, having heard all that was discussed this morning, it would be appropriate for us to do so.
The Honorable Minister of Finance has indicated, and I hope I'm not misquoting, that the country has spent approximately $5 billion in terms of intervention since the pandemic began. Is that the number?
Yes, Chair. In the last fiscal year, he would have indicated 200 million, I believe, additionally allocated in this fiscal year.
Right. Can you give us a disaggregation of how much of that, what percentage of that, or how much of that went specifically to these social salary relief grant, social support grant, in the context of the overall $5 billion figure? So the country gets a sense of how much direct intervention would have gone into people's day-to-day needs. Because I know a lot of it went also to rental grants and fuel grants at some stage for maxi taxis and business grants. But certainly the day-to-day needs of citizens would have been some of the most pressing in the last 18 months in the tranches identified by your good selves earlier on. Sorry to put you on the spot there with that.
Yes, I do have some figures from our budget presentation, but I would prefer if we could send it to you in writing to be more appropriate and correct.
In terms of the data collection from the ministry, which is a question I asked the Ministry of Social Development earlier on, is there a sense of the sectors that need more support looking forward for some sort of sustainable economic recovery and also for social intervention? Because one of the things that the country realized is that even coming out of the lockdown measures, the private sector businesses that would have been impacted realized that just reopening did not necessarily mean people had disposable income to support those businesses. And they continue to be stymied by cash flow issues, etc., because the man in the street, so to speak, generally, we're still dealing with employment issues and underemployment issues. So is that part of where the ministry is focusing moving forward in terms of the recovery of the economy and sustainability?
Well, Chair, as you are indicating clearly, some sectors would have experienced the negative impact of the pandemic to a much greater extent than other sectors. So, what you will find is a lot of these sectors will be in the wider services industry. So when you look at subsectors in the services industry, you know, immediately you could look at construction, the construction industry, industries, businesses that would be in restaurants, bars, hotels, businesses involved in retail trade. You know, and as you look through the services sector, you know, we can identify many niche areas, creative arts, you know. So indeed, we would need to give this. Yes, we would.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, we will need to clearly give this further attention with regard to having a survey conducted as well. Okay, so that we will be able to get some greater details on the extent to which, you know, persons in the different sectors would have been impacted.
I think it certainly is a productive endeavor, because at the end of the day, if the Ministry of Finance doesn't have a clear idea of what sectors had been impacted and how, it will certainly affect your ability to collect taxes from those sectors if the businesses and sectors were not performing well moving forward. Would that be unthinkable?
That is correct, Chair.
Yeah. All right. I think we have the Ministry of. Thank you so much. Ministry of Labor is back on another device. Acting PS Willis, are you with us again?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Much better. Thank you. We're hearing you loud and clear. Thank you so much. All right. If your colleague would answer the question we posed earlier on, I know he started, but it was cloudy. So if he could restart the answering of that question we posed to him earlier on. Thank you. I think you will have multiple devices on at the same time. That's where we're getting the feedback and the delay. So you'd have, if you have one device on, it may be helpful.
So good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead, please. And then turn the volume down on the device a bit so we don't get the feedback and the delay. Thank you so much. We're hearing you much better now.
So yes, so you're hearing us much better now, right?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, all right. So what would have happened generally in the labor force? We only got up to the second quarter of 2020 from the CSO. So we did some analysis on that data. And that data would have been showing in general, the labor force would have dropped, the persons with jobs would have dropped, and the total unemployed would have increased. Just to give you an idea of the figures, what have happened is that we look at the various quarters. We look at the quarter for this year, the second quarter of 2020 in comparison to the second quarter of 2019. We do that because of the fact that we understand the unemployment structure within an economy is seasonal, right? So when we looked at the second quarter of 2020 in comparison to that of 2019, we realized there was a fall in the labor force of 7,100 persons, right? So we will have to do a little bit more investigation to give you the reason for that, but that probably may have been because of some people may have retired or some people may have left the labor force to attend to home duties because of the pandemic, right? We also looked at the persons with jobs and realized, we also looked at the persons with jobs and realized there was a fall of 11,700 persons. Now the same second quarter 2020 in comparison to that of the second quarter 2019. Right. When we looked at the total unemployed, we saw an increase of 4,400 persons. Right? Just bearing in mind, again, is the corresponding quarters of the second quarter of 2020 to that of 2019. When we looked at persons with jobs by industry, based on the fall that I told you before, which was 11,700, the majority of industry which saw that decrease in terms of persons with jobs were in that of the manufacturing sector, the construction sector, and also what we call community and services, and also wholesale and retail. So just let me give you some figures. For instance, in the manufacturing, there was a fall in persons with jobs of 16,700 persons. That is about 37.7%. In terms of construction, there was a fall in persons with jobs of 12,100. That'll be about 15.9%. In wholesale and retail, there was a fall in terms of persons with jobs of about 10,600 persons. That'll be about 10.1%. And in terms of community and personal services, there would have been a fall of what? Probably about 4,700 persons or 2.2%. Now that is in terms of industry. If you look at in terms of type of worker.
Just before you go on, is there a total on that there? Because my cursory calculation, I don't know if he's hearing me. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
In terms of my cursory arithmetic there, that almost adds up to 100,000
right.
jobs.
So what will happen is that the figures you're looking at in the sub-industry, there are some sub-industries that would have increased in employment. So when you add up all of them, the final figure is what you would get in terms of the total, which I told you before, which was.
So what's the net reduction or the net gain if that is the case?
Right. So the net reduction was 11,700 persons with jobs.
So yeah. There were job gains for about 60, 70,000 people. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but I didn't call out all the sectors. What I'm calling out is the major sectors that would have had a fall in persons with jobs.
And when you
Right?
say a
There are other
fall in
sectors,
person, you're talking about a reduction in jobs, right?
persons with jobs, yes.
So if you could just go over that again for us, please, for clarity, in terms of the
Yes.
sectors and the numbers of jobs that would have been lost or reduced.
Okay.
Please.
So I can start from the beginning in terms of all the sectors. I was just going to give you the major sectors, but I can give you all the sectors.
You can give
So
us
for
the major
example-
sectors.
Huh?
You can give us the major sectors.
Okay, so what a lot of, okay, for instance, for agriculture, there was an increase in terms of persons with jobs of 8,800 persons. Right? Within the petroleum sector, there would have been an increase of 4,300 persons. Right? In terms of the financing and insurance industry, there would have been an increase of 5,000 persons. Right? And that would have been the increases, the major increases during that particular period. Now, the major decreases would have seen in manufacturing of 16,700 persons, as I said before. In construction, you would have seen a decrease in 12,100 persons. In wholesale and retail, you would have seen a decrease in 10,600 persons. And that would have been basically. So I gave you the major, I would have given you major statistics for both the increases and decreases, right?
Okay, thank you very much. So you have a clear sense, and this is comparison between 2019 second quarter and 2020 second quarter.
Yes,
that's
yes.
your frame of reference. Okay.
We must do it on a seasonal basis because you'll get a more accurate figure.
All right, if I could go back, thank you so much, sir. That's a great bit of data we got there. In terms of Ms. Willis, the acting PS, had there been from the Ministry of Labor for the state sector, which because the public sector would generally have a reference in the state sector, of what the state would have put in place in terms of policy for employment deliverables, vis-a-vis work from home arrangements, hybrid arrangements, which is part of the purview of this inquiry. Is there an official policy on that? Was there ever an official policy on that? And if so, what was that policy? What did it look like?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So there is no official policy on work from home. The Industrial Relations Advisory Committee, which is a creature of the IRA and which was established to provide guidance to the Minister of Labor on all matters related to industrial relations or labor matters, would have done a report coming out of which would have been guidelines to treat with remote work. The Ministry of Planning and Development, I understand, has indicated that they are developing a policy with regard to work from home. The Ministry of Labor would have provided that ministry with the guidelines developed by the IRAC, and it should also be noted that the Occupational Safety and Health Agency would have also developed guidelines to treat with this issue, as it is really, part of it is really a health and safety issue.
So what was the approach taken by various state agencies then, if there was no official policy and guidelines were issued? Is it that based on the particular agency and their remit and their function, they would amend the guidelines to suit their needs?
Yes, the guidelines were to provide, well, as I said, to provide guidance to employers on how to treat with this issue of working from home in the absence of a policy.
How much of this was done in collaboration with the trade union movement in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay, well, the composition of the IRAC is multi-partite. It comprises the trade union movement, employer organizations, as well as government representatives and academia.
Is there an ongoing process to reconcile this new reality we're in? Because I mean, at the end of the day, the state is moving back to opening up in a safe zone environment, but it still means that the pandemic is still here. So it still means that there are still provisions that need to be put in place. For one, health and safety of workers, but two, productivity and deliverables. So I'm not getting a sense that we are in a place where we're all on the same page. And I don't know if you can answer that question, but that's my concern.
And I understand your concern, Chair. But we are committed at the ministry to ensuring that all steps are taken to have these issues addressed, whether be it from an interministerial committee established or from one of our committees under the ministry, whether it's IRAC, whether it's whether at the larger level of NTAC, but we are committed to ensuring that this is done.
What has been the biggest shock based on the industrial court's revelations about matters filed? What has been the biggest challenge or shock to the system for the IRA in Trinidad and Tobago and industrial relations in Trinidad and Tobago, given the effects of the pandemic? Because the cursory look at the data but matters filed in the industrial court suggests that a lot of resolution has not taken place, where people feel they have no recourse but to head to the courts. Even intervention from the Ministry of Labor doesn't seem to have stymied that. Is the issue an absence of guidance, so people don't know what to do, so they were just pivoting to survive without clear guidelines?
No, the Conciliation Advisory and Advocacy Division of the ministry has been quite active in terms of having outreach in providing the information that is needed by members of the public, by employers, by employees in terms of their rights and responsibilities. And they have instituted measures to allow persons access to this information. So they're quite active in going out and providing that information to members of the public.
Member Singh, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to find out, as we're in a relation to workers' rights as well as employers' rights, I want a simplified answer to employees in terms of what employees can do, or rather what this Ministry of Labor can do where employees realize that their employers are not paying, for example, things like their NIS contributions and things like that. You know, I know you all have enforcement operations at the ministry, but simplified for the employees so that, you know, stated step by step what employees can do if they suspect that their employers are not paying their NIS contribution. And I'll just ask the second one time, Mr. Chair, through you. What is the status, if any, with regard to the pandemic leave that we've heard about? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Member Singh. With regard to your first question of what employees can do, well, the responsibility for payment of NIS is with the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, and they would have a compliance officer at that organization to treat with these issues. But in terms of employees who are not receiving what they're entitled to, they can come to the ministry and lodge complaints with our Labor Inspectorate unit. They can also
send via email to the Labor Inspectorate at labor.inspector@gov.tt. They can call at 299-0300 with regard to speaking with either the Labor Inspectorate or the Conciliation Advisory and Advocacy Division. They can also send email to the conciliation.mol@gov.tt. In those instances, the officers at these divisions will respond and address their complaints and provide guidance as to what they need to do, as well as follow up with the relevant employer.
Following that, Ms. Willis, your submission stated that reports received by the Conciliation Advisory and Advocacy Division of the Ministry of Labor during the period March 2020 to September 2021 highlighted 115 reported disputes pursuant to the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act, 88 reports of trade disputes pertaining to layoffs, and 1,019 reports of trade disputes concerning termination of service. Of these, how many of these disputes have been resolved? And is the ministry concerned about these figures, which are, in my estimation, significant increases for corresponding periods the years before?
So thank you, Chair. Yes, the ministry is concerned because it is clear that there's need for greater consultation with employer organizations in terms of how to treat with matters. And especially, it should be noted that in terms of conciliation of matters, this is offered within 14 days. In some instances, parties are not able to meet within the specified period, and as such, an unresolved certificate of the dispute is issued.
You finished? Okay,
So,
also,
as I was indicating earlier, we need to have greater consultations, training with the relevant employer organizations and unions. And this has been happening, but we haven't as yet measured the impact of these interventions.
thank you. Member Ford and then Member Naked.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Acting PS, Ms. Willis, in your submission, you stated that the data capture mechanism of the Labor Inspectorate unit is currently being reviewed, right? This is submission objective 1, question 7 on page 6 of your submission. And my question to you are, what is the timeline for the completion of this review? And secondly, given that persons are returning to work, does the Ministry of Labor have a mechanism to monitor employment and unemployment trends post-COVID-19 restrictions? Could you shed some light there, please?
Okay, so with regard to the first question, the data capture system of the
Tell Member Naked.
the Labor Inspectorate.
Ask questions.
Yes, it is being revised. What we are seeking to do also is digitalize the services of that unit. So it's all part of our digitalization strategy for the ministry. We have received monies under the Public Sector Investment Program for this initiative, and we are really in the embryonic stages of this.
Do we have a
With
timeline?
regard to,
A timeline for
excuse me,
completion?
member?
Are you able to give a timeline of the completion?
with regard to the entire project is a 3-year project.
Okay, okay.
But as I said, we are in the embryonic stages of this. We would have our IT unit would have done the relevant discussions. So we developing the strategy coming out of that, of those discussions.
Okay. Additionally, are we in a position to have information, whether in a tabulated form or statistics, with regards to the number of man hours, right, that during the COVID period, remember, a decision was taken that public servants would be able to work from home, right? Are we able to tabulate the number of man hours pertaining to the period from when we went on lockdown to when we went back out? Because we would have had different periods of lockdowns. We would have had different times where individuals were in and out of work. Are we able to have in a tabulated form the number of man hours that would have taken, what would have occurred there? And additionally, do we have a cost factor associated with those number of man hours? Because remember, we were made clear that no public servants lost salaries, right? They continue to have their salaries. So I would just like to know, in a tabulated form, the number of man hours, and then additionally, the cost of that man hours, so that we can be able to have an appreciation of the benefits that would have been extended to individuals during the COVID period. Over to you, Ms. Willis.
We would have to ask the relevant ministries and departments to submit that information. We have not done so, but this is something I believe we may want to collaborate with the CPO on, as they are responsible for terms and conditions. So this is one aspect we would want to have that collaboration.
Yeah.
But as of now, we don't have that information.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that's pertinent information that will be good for this committee. So again, I know the time
if they can supply it in writing.
If it can be supplied, yeah.
As well as the information her colleagues supplied earlier on. Member Nakid, go ahead, please.
Hello. My first question would relate to your ministry's submission that highlighted the voluntary initiative implemented to combat the limitations of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act. Are there any plans to amend the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act to make it compulsory for employers to report the termination of employment under a wider scope? Under a wider scope of circumstances?
In this, member, I will ask my senior legal officer to respond to this, as she has been part of the labor legislation reform project.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Specifically in response to your question, Member Nakid, at this point in time, the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act only contains a provision for 5 or more retrenchments to be reported to the Minister of Labour. During the course of the pandemic, we realized that this was something that was an issue for us, and notwithstanding the legal provision, through the Conciliation and Advisory and Advocacy Division, we would have issued a notice, an advisory to members of the public, requesting that all retrenchments, no matter the size, be reported to the ministry to allow us to have that opportunity to collect the data. In addition to that, we have been looking at the amendment of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act. We have been looking at the amendments to the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act. We had in the process of finalizing a policy in respect of that. However, the event of the pandemic has given us a data set and a set of issues that we would not have considered when we were originally looking at the retrenchment. That is, how do you manage retrenchment and the attendant issues during the times of crisis? So we are using the opportunity provided to us and the data and experiences collected by the Conciliation and Advisory and Advocacy Division to assist in further refining the policy to take into consideration the lessons we have learned and continue to learn from the pandemic.
For such an amendment will, as it follows on, it would more accurately track unemployment trends, wouldn't it?
Member David, I must apologize. As part of the technical difficulties we are experiencing, we did not hear your entire question. Can you kindly...
Okay, as a follow-on to what the information that you proffered, such an amendment would help your ministry, of course, to more accurately track the unemployment trends, which would be of invaluable service to the government, I would imagine. Correct?
Yes, to the government and to the benefit of the citizens of this country, yes.
Okay. I would like to ask you one more question. In your submission, you stated that the Labor Inspectorate unit of the MOL received 72 telephone calls and 20 in-office visits during the period March 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2021, pertaining to queries connected with issues such as changes in terms and conditions of employment, reduction in days and hours worked, and reduction in salary. Given the increased public demand for advice on employment issues, has the Ministry of Labour sought to increase access to advisory services via the Labour Inspectorate unit?
Yes, Member Naked. During the time, the Ministry of Labour recognized not only the additional and increased need for access to services, but we also recognize the difficulty that not being able to physically access our various offices, because we have offices across the country that persons can access. The Labour Inspectorate and Conciliation Advisory and Advocacy Services. We did recognize the issues that would be faced by not being able to have physical contact. We had, in addition to having forms available, physical forms available at offices, we would have updated our contact information on the ministry's website and social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, on all of our social media handles to update the contact information. So we have various contact information available, and both of these divisions have separate emails in addition to updating the ministry's website to put on the website contact form where persons can type in their issues for us there. And we have received complaints via our communications divisions, which would then be promptly forwarded on to Labour Inspectorate and Conciliation. And we do receive phone calls during the time, which we have, and I have personally received a few. We do forward on to the relevant units with the information for assistance to members of the public.
Thanks for all the information, quite detailed, but just looking at the numbers, 72 telephone calls from March 1st to July 31 in such a time. Seems quite a small amount, of course, doesn't it? Is that because of the amount of workers you have available to process those calls, or what would the reason be? Because we have almost 200,000 people who have dropped out of the system. So, tell me. Sorry, go on.
With respect to the data, it was for that specific period. What we can do is recognizing the issue that you've raised and the numbers that you have pointed out to us, we can review our data and make a further submission in writing to provide a detailed answer, because there may be data gaps that we may have missed, and we would want to take the opportunity to rectify that given the question that you've raised, if that would be permitted.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for your.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Member Naked. We're trying to end at 12:30 because there's a sitting of the House of Representatives later on this afternoon. And we want to include some wrap-up comments from our guests. But before we go, and I'm going to put you on notice, Ministry of Labor officials, we're going to invite you back because of the technical issues we had today to more clearly inquire into your issues. So that's on record. And if you could supply the information that your colleague, Ms. Willis, gave us earlier, including the numbers of the various sectors in full, in writing to the Secretariat, we'd appreciate that greatly. But just before we go to your wrap-ups, is there a system in place in the Ministry of Labor for disaggregating unemployment as opposed to underemployment? Because in the context of COVID-19, while the reports may have been about job losses or terminations, I don't know if there's a mechanism to track loss of hours from 40 a week to 20 a week in the context of the impact on people because of the pandemic in the private sector.
Okay. So we, of course, CSO being the main collector of data, we would be reliant on the data provided by CSO in this regard. But once we receive that data, the Labor Market Information Unit would be the one to interrogate that data and do the analysis in terms of that aspect.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to invite, I think there's a question that I was supposed to ask here from one member of the audience. Okay. And does the ministry collect unemployment data for TNT, and how often and where is this information published, if so? From a question to a member of the public.
I'll ask the Head Labor Market Information Unit to respond.
Yes. Yes, we do collect the unemployment rate data, and we collect it from the CSO. It's done on a quarterly basis. And as I said, the last quarter we got was in the second quarter of 2020. But we have historical data going back as far as, I think, probably 1992 in terms of quarterly data. So if anyone wants a series in terms of data, we can give them that. And any data going forward, we also get as well from the CSO, and we have it stored in a database.
Okay, thank you. I think it's your mask. Yeah. You have a very thick mask. That could be a problem.
Okay, probably yes. That. Yes.
But I understand the health protocols must be maintained. All right, at this time, we'd like to invite. Yes?
Is it possible I can slip in one question? We could probably get the information
if it's a short question, yes.
Right. It's with regards to the OJT program, right? We know it caters for the graduates or individuals within the community between the ages of 8 to 35 years, which is a critical group in terms of coming out of school and seeking employment and so on, right? Question, what is the number of OJT trainees currently assigned to the public sector and private sector respectively, right? And it could be provided in writing because I presume it would be, quite a number of information. And additionally, based on the allocation that has been presented, right? Based on the allocation that has been provided during the period 2020 to 2021, has the ministry observed an increase in postgraduate degree holders seeking employment with regards to the OJT program? Because as you know, the OJT program may be a minimal salary, but I know, individuals are seeking employment. So I'd just like to get a little synopsis on how the program is operating, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And just to make a correction, the program targets persons aged 16 to 35.
16, okay.
16, yes, which is the the approved age for employment in Trinidad and Tobago. With regard to we will provide the information with regard to the number of persons currently employed, disaggregated as you have asked, unless Ms. David has that information that she can share now. No, with regard to the question on the increasing number of graduates, would you, Ms. David, can you respond to that?
Good day, member.
Good day.
And committee, thanks for having us this morning. What I would say in terms of not having the exact figures to give you, and we would provide in writing, yes, we have seen an increase in the number of applications coming for people with BSCs, but that I do not see as a bad thing because of the fact that the program in itself is geared to providing them, when they get their certification, with an opportunity for job-ready skills through the on-the-job training program, which is the National Apprenticeship Program. So the budget allocation for this year would provide us with an opportunity to increase that number of persons that we could provide opportunity for. But that is also reliant on the increase in training providers coming onto the program in order to be able to provide that critical opportunity that is necessary.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to invite Deputy DPS Ministry of Finance for closing comments, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The Ministry of Finance is happy and thank you for the opportunity to be involved in this discussion this morning. We also commit to providing and taking the necessary action where applicable in respect of the recommendation the committee will provide after the inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, PS, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. The discussion here has been enlightening, and I think we would have to take what is discussed here into consideration when we do our COVID impact assessment. We have already done the framework for that study in terms of the aims, purpose, and methodology. We are aware that we will have to do a lot of triangulation of the data that is in the environment, so that we can get a better understanding and be able to prepare ourselves for similar events like this in the future. We're committed to sending the additional information shortly to the committee to further its deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and contribution. Ms. Willis, Acting PS, Ministry of Labor.
Thank you, Chair. And just to express appreciation for being invited to this important discussion this morning, this important inquiry. We at the ministry are committed to ensuring that the information requested is provided. We recognize that we would need to meet again, and we look forward to the next occasion when we will need to continue the discussion. And we recognize also that there's need for greater collaboration among certain ministries in respect of this issue, and greater measurement of the impact of what we do.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to have you again. And Mr. Mayo, Director of Labor, THA, Division of Community Development and Enterprise Development.
Good afternoon again. We here at our division, we are grateful for this session. We also commit to giving the committee the information that is requested and the information that is needed. We thank you for all your insight, and we are hopeful that the Tobago economy will get back up and will push forward, especially within the tourism sector. We thank you again.
Thank you so much. We'd like to thank all our stakeholders and those who would have been posting and commenting and sending questions on our Parliament social media platforms. On behalf of the committee members, Mr. Ford, Member Beckles, and Member Singh, and Member Naked, and members who could not be with us today, Members Monroe, Mohit, and Sinanan. I'm the Chairman, Paul Richard. Thank you all for being with us, and this meeting is now adjourned.
Good job, Chair.
Well, we have the next meeting for the 8th of December, so we will look forward to that, and any comments you have, please send it to the Secretariat. Thank you all again, and be safe.